everybody, welcome to another video. Today I'm going to be talking about a new favorite book that I found, which, shockingly for everyone, is actually fantasy romance. I know I've been having a ton of trouble finding a fantasy romance that I actually enjoy, but the moment that I picked this book up, I was hooked in a way that I haven't been in a really long time. Because a lot of times I read a book and I'm aware that I'm reading, you know what I mean? I know what page I'm on. I'm like, oh, I'm not quite halfway through yet. I need to read a little bit more today, get it further through. It's not fun. Obviously, I really enjoy reading, but I know that I'm doing a little bit of work to do so, right? I'm reading physical words. It's a little bit harder than watching TV, right? But this book, I felt like I just flew through it. I didn't even realize I was reading words. I was just experiencing the story. It just had a hold of me and just didn't let go, right? Anyways, that book is going to be The Bridge Kingdom by Danielle L. Jensen. So, yeah, we're going to get into a review. There are going to be spoilers, just a huge amount of spoilers. So, everybody, this is your chance to click off the video if you haven't read this book or if you don't want to be spoiled. But yeah, we'll jump to the video. Alright, everybody. So, again, spoilers are about to occur. We've got The Bridge Kingdom here. This is not the nicest book. I got it for $4 on Pango. So, the edges are a little bitten up and everything. I don't know what happened to it, but I don't really care too much. Maybe someday I'll get a special edition, but I'm too cheap, so maybe I won't. But, Bridge Kingdom. I'm just going to walk you through the story, honestly, and give my opinions as I go. So, yeah. So this book opens, and that is what grabbed me, because I got the sample, right? Because I'd heard so much about it on Booktube, and wow, was everyone right. I believe it was actually Elliot Brooks who kind of inspired me to pick it up, because she's talked about this a bunch, and I was like, maybe I'll finally try a fantasy romance that I'll like. Ugh, it was amazing. And I think the reason for that is that this book actually has a good amount of fantasy, again, without the magic, I guess, but it has world building, right? There's not magic, but there is a lot of world building, and there's a lot of plot, and a lot of, a kind of a fantasy plot. There's just not magic, but it doesn't really need it. And there is a full romance story as well. And I feel like a lot of times fantasy romance kind of will be a little bit less of one or the other, or in some cases both, where the story doesn't feel as satisfying because it's kind of not a complete story on either side. But this was complete romance and a complete, plot line, which was amazing. But the way it started out made me know that I was going to like it, which was that, the scene opens, there's this dinner, and one of them's being selected to go and marry this guy in another kingdom. His name's Aaron. Main character's name is Laura. And you find out later that this isn't entirely what happened, kills all of her sisters to take their place. And I was just like, wow, what an opening to a book, honestly. I mean, just nothing, no preamble, just boom. Everybody's dead at the dinner table. And she's like, you thought you picked the best choice, but you forgot, the most important characteristic, which is ruthlessness. And I was like, wow, all right, you know what? This is a romance I can get behind, right? Because she actually has a spine. This is just very different, right? So we find out that she actually, fake poisoned them to save them, which still works for me, right? It was still a great opening. Anyways, so she goes, and we see all of this poverty and starving in her kingdom, and that is why she's being sent, because allegedly the Bridge Kingdom, which her future husband controls, is taxing everybody to death, essentially. Because the only way that her kingdom, Maradrina, can get supplies and food for their people is through the bridge, and it costs a lot of money because the Bridge Kingdom has really heavy taxes. And so she thinks that he is just ruthlessly causing the murders of all of these people, and she has been raised in this isolated camp with her sisters and trained to be an assassin and a spy and a strategist and lots of other things, right? But also to be just fundamentally loyal to her country. And so she's going with the intention of saving her people and not so much because she's evil, right? So you can get behind this. Right away, obviously, you feel like something is a little bit wrong though, because her father is obviously murdering a bunch of people to have this plot done, and you're like, okay, those are not the actions of the hero of the story, right? He is probably wrong, there's something more to this. And obviously, it's a romance, so you're clearly there's something else going on here, right? So she goes. We learn that she doesn't know how to swim, which is pretty important later on, which I think was a really good move on the author's part, because instead of the main character being this, like, oh, I can just defeat everyone because I'm a strong female character and I'm the best, right? She actually has this really unfortunate weakness for an island nation, which is that she cannot swim and she's super duper afraid of being on boats, right? And so that actually makes her not quite as formidable, not quite as, like, I don't need anybody, I'm perfect, right? Which you see a lot in female protagonists. But she actually had, like, a very real and visceral weakness, right? Anyways, marriage ceremony, kind of weird, everybody wears masks, whatever. She's been raised to believe that this man is like a demon, essentially. So, she gets drugged, which doesn't really help our impressions of Aaron and his kingdom, and wakes back up in the palace and meets his sister, who's kind of rude and all this stuff. So we learn that they're going to keep her on this little island where his parents used to live, so that she doesn't learn secrets, because they don't trust her, and rightfully so. So she has to kind of trick them into thinking that she's sort of not very skilled at anything, even though their women are warriors. From her kingdom, the women are just wives and live at home and everything, so she has to pretend that that's all that she knows how to do, even though it isn't. And so then, throughout the book, we see her interacting with Aaron and trying to, like, get information out of him while slowly falling in love with him. And they fall in love because they have all of these interactions where they, like, see this other side of each other. She tries to go and see the bridge and gets lost in the jungle, and he saves her from a snake, which isn't really like the action of a villain, right? And then he shows her the bridge anyway, and she discovers a way in. Then he takes her on a tour, and she, of course, gets to see more of the bridge than they ever intended, because there's an attack. And in the attack, she saves his life, which is partly so that she can continue her mission, but she's already grown to, like, care about him, right? Because she's seeing this affection from somebody that she wasn't expecting to see affection from, and she's also grown up in a horrible situation, and so these people being nice to her is very confusing, right? And then he sees this genuineness in her, and then also, like, she rescues him, and that seems like a pretty selfless act, but she rescues him a little bit too well, a little bit too skillfully, and so there's a little bit of suspicion there, right? But over time, she's talking to him. She actually ignores him earlier in the book after he has a bunch of invaders killed, which we find out why, and it's because, their island is very hard to hold, and he has to keep the population safe and everything like that, right? And behaves as though this horrified her, which, like, it kind of did, but, like, she's murdered a bunch of people, so it doesn't really matter, right? And she makes him come to her, and they have this card game where they ask each other questions, and she's a little bit too obvious about her digging into the bridge and its defenses, which is what she's there to find out. And then, over time, she's trying to learn how to be in a boat. She's using her skills as a healer to help his men. And there comes this point where they've just had all these positive interactions, and they're kind of, like, flirting, and he comes to see her on this little boat every day, right? And they're already married, so there's just sort of this, like, tension between them. And then she helps his people during a battle and is pulling people out of the middle of the battle to heal them, and he thinks that she doesn't know how to fight at all, and so he views this as, like, a very selfless act. She wins over the people, which was really important to him. They have to share a bed and, like, a bunk and whatever. And you see them slowly building this bond, but then she still has this doubt, because she's like, well, I have to put my country before my feelings for this person, because we have heard him say some out-of-context things that do sound like he wants her nation to starve, and he doesn't care about all of the innocent people. Which, like, is a little bit true, but isn't exactly the whole truth, right? Because it is more her father's fault, because he wanted to allow them to get food or whatever through the treaty that her marriage secured. But her father wanted weapons instead, and so the people are starving and blaming him, and, he doesn't really do anything about it, but it wasn't his fault. Exactly, right? Anyway. He knows that she's a spy, and they have this fight about what is happening, right? Because she has been told lies, and he is like, that's not at all what's happening here. But they have this big fight, and she goes and she writes a letter to her father detailing everything that she knows in invisible ink on all of his pieces of paper. But what she doesn't know is that he had started a letter to her father at one point and hidden it in a compartment so that it couldn't be tampered with. Anyways, he takes her to her own kingdom to show her the truth of his words, and she sees that he is right. Sorry, my hair is everywhere. And she decides to go to the palace to kill her father. he doesn't know this and follows her and almost kills her because he thinks that she is going to, like, reveal his country's secrets, which she doesn't. She turns back, and everything's all good. They move on, they leave, they escape, and they decide that they're going to be in love. She destroys the letters, but what she doesn't realize is that he had already written another letter, and the one that had been hidden, he crumpled up, or left out, and then got a new piece of paper. And so her count of the number of pieces of paper is off because there was a hidden piece of paper, and then he replaced it with one of the ones with invisible ink. Anyways, they fall in love, and they have these months of, like, being in love and being in his island nation's, like, secret volcano hideout before the letter reaches her father, in which it seems like she has betrayed both her father and Aaron. And then her sister shows up at the end to kill Aaron, and she has to kill her own sister, who she sacrificed everything for, her sisters, to save him. And she's clearly, like, pretty unhinged, though, like the sister, so, you know, we all are like, you kind of had to do it, right? The nation falls, and she has to leave. And she goes to this northern kingdom and hangs out in a bar until she hears that Aaron's been captured, and then she has to come back and convince his sister that she should help. And that's kind of where the book ends, with the nation has fallen. And that is not where I thought it was going to go at all, right? Because I thought it was going to be fantasy romance, and, you know, the whole first book, they're going to be like, there's this tension, and she's a spy, and whatever. But it's all going to work out in the end, and he's going to, like, understand, and she's going to understand, and they're going to be happily ever after and tell her father to go away. And then the second book is going to be them, like, fighting him together forever. And, you know, because that's typically how fantasy romance goes. They get together and everything's fine, and a little bit boring after that because there's not really any tension. But instead, everything went horribly wrong, and you know it. For all of the chapters where they're happy and together, instead of you, the reader, being like, wow, they're together, you're like, no, you don't understand. Everything is terrible. You just don't know it yet. And so it just creates this sense of tension throughout the entire book, because at first you know there's something wrong in the information that Laura has, you just don't know what it is, and you're waiting for this, like, other shoe to drop for her to betray him or to figure out, and there's this tension that just keeps you reading and reading. But then after the happy thing happens, you know what happened with the letter, and neither of them do. And so instead of you feeling the happiness, there's this, like, dissonance because the characters are so happy, and you're like, no, you don't understand. Anyways, and she allowed it to go horribly wrong at the end of the first book, you know? The kingdom falls, and people die, and there are actual severe consequences for her actions. And then her husband is captured, and then the book ends. It's over. That's the end of the book, right? What a good book. I was on the edge of my seat for the week it took for the second book to arrive. I was just like, I haven't felt that way about a book in such a long time. I was just so eager to find out what happened. So anyways, Bridge Kingdom, I gave it 5 stars. I had such a great time. If you're looking for a fantasy romance with intrigue, and for some reason you watched this whole video and you didn't care about being spoiled, then you should really pick this book up. But yeah, I had a great time, everybody. Thank you so much for watching this video. Bye.